They called her Clipboard Chick, the quiet cadet who never spoke up, who wore faded, threadbare gloves that looked like they belonged in a junkyard, who sat alone while others laughed. But when a civilian aircraft plunged toward restricted airspace with no radio contact, while instructors froze and cadets panicked, she didn't hesitate. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade, calm, precise, unshakable. And when a decorated colonel walked into that room 30 minutes later, covered in dust from the field, he did something no one expected. He pointed directly at her and said 5 words that shattered everything they thought they knew. "That's the one who saved my team." This is the story of Ava Lewis, the woman they underestimated, the warrior they never saw coming, and the day an entire Air Force base learned what true strength really looks like. 0715 hours, Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas. The morning sun had not just risen, it had declared war. Heat radiated off the tarmac in waves, turning the air thick and hostile. Rows of T-6, Texan II, trainers sat gleaming on the flight line like silver bullets waiting to be fired. The smell of jet fuel mixed with sweat, ambition, and anxiety. Inside the main hangar, chaos wore a uniform. Boots thundered across concrete. Clipboards clattered. Voices bounced off metal walls. Everyone moved with purpose, chasing something they couldn't quite name. Glory, validation, survival. But Ava Lewis didn't chase anything, she observed. She moved through the crowd like smoke present but unnoticed. Brown hair pulled back with military precision. Not a strand out of place. A plain green notebook tucked under her arm like it was part of her anatomy. That notebook earned her the nickname, Clipboard Chick. No one knew who started it, but it stuck, like gum on a boot sole. She never corrected them. The other cadets didn't hate her. That would have required noticing her. Instead, they offered half smiles that never reached their eyes. They cracked jokes while she took notes. They swapped stories over lunch while she sat alone, eyes fixed on the flight line, watching every T-6 launch like it held the secrets of the universe. Some called her intense, others that she overthought everything. A few whispered that she was only here because standards had dropped, that she couldn't hack it in the air, so she compensated with theory, with checklists, with rules. No one said it to her face, but she heard it anyway. You always do. In the way people stop talking when you enter a room. In the glances exchanged just after you speak. In the group chats you're never added to. Ava kept her head down and her hands steady. She wasn't flashy in the cockpit. During formations, her lines were clean but never showy. During debriefs, she never defended herself. If an instructor pointed out a mistake, she nodded once, wrote it down, and moved on. Quiet competence. That's what she carried, and it made her invisible. 2,130 hours, Simulator Bay, while others gathered around vending machines swapping stories about G-force blackouts and close calls. Ava could be seen through the simulator room window, alone, headset on, replaying emergency descent drills for the 3rd time that night. 9:30 p.m. to 11:00 p.m. every night. Same routine. Her fingers moved over the same controls, over and over. Muscle memory carved from repetition and dedication no one would ever applaud. She never tried to impress anyone. She didn't need to. What no one asked was why someone would work that hard when no one was watching. Why someone so quiet carried that same green notebook everywhere. Why her eyes never left the flight line during lunch, watching every takeoff like it meant something more. She wasn't just another flight student. Not really. But no one saw it yet. 1,045 hours. Sector for training zone. The sun hung overhead like a judge's gavel. Inside the T-6 cockpit, heat wrapped around Ava like a python. Her hands stayed steady on the controls. Checklist complete. Headset snug. Canopy sealed. Just another training sortie. Until it wasn't. Her flight partner for the day was Carson, a loud second-year cadet with opinions bigger than his skill set. He'd already made his thoughts clear during pre-flight. Flying isn't just about checklists and theory. Lewis. Real pilots fly with instinct, not bullet points. When Ava eased into a climbing turn controlled, textbook precise, his voice crackled through the MIC with contempt. What are you doing? Flying a sightseeing tour? You can't even port to G's. She didn't answer. She finished the maneuver and brought the aircraft smoothly back to heading. No dips, no corrections, just the quiet hum of disciplined flying. 1,120 hours, flight line debrief. One of the instructors leaned against a wing, sipping coffee, half watching the debrief. His voice carried just enough to make sure everyone heard. If she can't handle a basic brake turn without hugging the throttle, she's not going to make it past the first week of OPS. A few cadets laughed. A few more looked away. No one said a word in her defense. Ava stood off to the side, arms crossed. When the debrief ended, she walked back toward the barracks alone. 19:15 hours. Her room. That night, she pulled up the flight recording. Hit replay. Her movements were crisp. Her angles were clean. She had flown the profile exactly as trained. It wasn't thrilling, but it was safe, efficient, repeatable, in an actual sortie that would have mattered. But no one saw that. They only saw what she didn't do, what she didn't shout, what she didn't overcorrect. 19:15 hours, simulator bay. The simulator was empty. Ava slid into the left seat, powered up the mock cockpit, and ran through another emergency scenario. She wasn't scheduled. No audience, no flight partner, no validation. Just muscle memory, quiet repetition, and hands that didn't tremble under pressure. She didn't fly to be noticed. She flew to be ready. And readiness doesn't always look impressive at first glance. 0610 hours. Morning ramp. Fog wrapped the tarmac like a burial shroud. The sun was just beginning to pour color into the sky. Ava moved across the pavement with quiet purpose. Helmet clipped to her flight pack. Checklist tucked into her clipboard sleeve. She reached the T6 parked at slot 7. Routine pre-flight. Nothing different. Nothing extraordinary. Battery on. Fuel boost checked. Oxygen confirmed. Flight controls free. Altimeter set. Then came the gloves. She reached into her bag and pulled at the same pair she wore every time. Faded green. Edges frayed at the seams. Soft with age and use. They didn't match the issued kind. The wrist cuffs had been restitched by hand. One finger patch barely hanging on. An instructor walking the line paused. Cocked an eyebrow. Muttered something just loud enough to carry. Thought we were flying jets, not working salvage. Must pick those up at a garage sale. A few cadets chuckled. Someone mimed sniffing the air. Ava didn't react. She slipped the gloves on slowly, finger by finger, then went back to checking her radios. The instructor moved on. The jokes faded. She never explained the gloves, never told anyone they had belonged to her father. He had flown a 10S, the Warthog. Years before, he didn't come back from his final deployment to Afghanistan. The gloves were the only thing shipped home that still held shape, still carried the curve of his grip, still smelled faintly of fuel and grit and heat. Ava didn't need a photo to remember him. She wore his memory every time she touched the stick. 0622 hours. Her voice came over the comms, clear and calm as ever. Ready for engine start. Slot 7, standing by. No hesitation, just the sound of someone who knew what mattered and what didn't. She never flinched when they laughed, not because she didn't hear it, but because she knew what those gloves had held, and the ones who mocked her couldn't imagine the weight of a grip like that. 1405 hours, simulator bay. The simulator bay buzzed with low conversation and the bitter scent of stale coffee. Ava stepped into the mock cockpit of the T6 without a word. The synthetic leather seat creaked as she strapped in. Overhead lights flickered dim orange, casting shadows across the instrument panel. SIM time. Emergency scenarios. Everyone knew the drill, but no one expected what came next. The flight started routine, taxi, takeoff, standard climb out. Then at 1418 hours, the HUD flickered once and cut to black. Comms dropped a second later. No warning, no instructor prompt, just silence. Across the room, the instructor sat back slightly in his chair, saying nothing, watching. Ava didn't flinch. Her fingers moved fast. Back up steam gauges. Turn coordinator steady. Airspeed alive. She checked her RPM, trimmed the nose, leveled the wings. No engine thrust, no visuals, no voice guidance. She initiated a dead stick landing, scanning her altimeter and VSI, calculating distance to the nearest simulated runway. She managed her glide slope with practice control, adjusted flaps mid-descent, lined up for final without external help. No panic, no flash, just method. She touched down at 1424 hours. Wheels squeaked gently on virtual pavement. Centerline perfect. The instructor glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly. He scribbled something in his log and said nothing. Back in the bay, one cadet muttered that the SIM probably glitched. Another shrugged, said the software must have defaulted her through the scenario. Someone else laughed and called it simulator luck. Ava unplugged her headset and stepped out of the cockpit. No one looked at her. No one said good job. No one asked how she did it. She walked back toward the lockers alone. What she did wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was clean, professional. The kind of flying that saves lives when things get real. The kind that doesn't need noise to be right. But to them, flaps down meant something went easy, and respect whatever little there might have been vanished. The moment she landed without a story worth retelling. 1540 hours. Briefing room. The briefing room was mostly quiet. Just a few cadets killing time before the next flight block, slouched in chairs, half watching the weather radar scroll across the projector screen. Ava sat off to the side as usual, reviewing the sortie checklist on her iPad, her gloves tucked under her elbow, a half-empty bottle of water balanced on the arm of the chair. A younger cadet leaned over and asked if he could check the updated flight schedule. Ava handed the tablet over without hesitation. He scrolled, tapping through base OPS screens, flipping tabs. Then, without meaning to, his thumb brushed the gallery icon. A photo opened. Not a recent one. Not anything from the simulator or the dorms. It was grainy, muted in color. Ava stood in front of an A10 Warthog, BDUS faded by the sun, boots covered in desert dust. Just behind her, half obscured, was a subdued patch, combat controller team. He didn't say anything, just stared a second too long. Ava stepped over and gently took the tablet back. Her face was calm, no irritation, no smile either, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't invite questions. 1,700 hours. By 5 o'clock p.m. Word had already started drifting down the halls. Someone saw something weird on her screen. Looked like old service photos. Didn't even match her uniform now. Had to be fake. Doesn't matter anyway. But a few didn't laugh. They didn't know what to make of it. Ava still walked the same. Still flew the same. Still kept to herself. But now, there was something unspoken in the air around her. A photo that shouldn't exist. A story no one had been told. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't who they thought she was. 1,440 hours. Flight operations building. A sharp tone cracked through the overhead speaker. Tango Delta. Real-world emergency. All training flights were immediately suspended. Cadets scattered from briefing rooms and SIM stations. Some still in flight suits. Others halfway through their gear checks. The air shifted. Quiet at first. Then confusion. On the status screen above the OPS desk, a red blip blinked just east of the training zone boundary. Civilian Cessna 172. Low and erratic. No radio contact. Entering restricted airspace. Air traffic control was already calling emergency frequencies, but the aircraft wasn't responding. Instructors clustered near the tower feed. Voices clipped. One was already coordinating with base security. Another ordered several cadets to clear the hallway. A few stood frozen near the comms desk, unsure whether to move or wait. Ava didn't move at all. She stepped forward. She slid on a spare headset from the radio station and reached for the secondary frequency. Selector, calm, intentional. Her thumb flicked the switch to 121.5 MHz, the emergency guard frequency used across civilian and military aviation. Without waiting for permission, she keyed the MIC. Cessna in restricted airspace north of Laughlin. This is Laughlin Base Operations on guard. You are squawking standby and descending below 3,000 feet. Verify your fuel state and intentions immediately. There was static. Then a faint, jittery voice came through. Older male. Slurred. Nervous. Last visual. Don't know the heading. Something about low fuel. Broken GPS. Ava responded evenly. Adjust heading to 30. Begin a shallow climb. Confirm fuel remaining in minutes, not hours. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look around. She called for the pilot to squawk 7700 emergency code, then asked him to reset his altimeter to 29.92. Every phrase was clipped, direct, steady. The exact cadence used in high-stakes air traffic coordination. The instructor closest to her stopped talking mid-sentence. Ava coaxed the pilot toward a stable altitude, directed him out of military airspace with a slow left turn. Gave him bearing toward a civilian field 20 miles southeast, repeated his heading 3 times until he locked it in, told him he was doing fine, told him he'd see the runway in 7 minutes if he held that course. No one else spoke, not the instructors, not the cadets. They just watched her work. 1,454 hours. The Cessna touched down safely at Eagle Pass Municipal. No incident, no damage. One safe landing logged, one silent room left behind. Ava set the headset down. No green, no comment. Just a quiet return to her seat as if nothing had happened. For the first time, people weren't laughing. They weren't doubting. They weren't speaking at all. They had just watched her do something none of them were ready for. Something that didn't come from a textbook. Something that sounded a lot like experience. 1,730 hours. Operations building. The air inside the operations building was starting to settle. The emergency was over. The screens had gone dark. Most cadets had drifted into hushed conversations or silent awe, but the tension hadn't fully lifted. Not yet. Then the door opened. A colonel stepped in, still dusty from the field. his uniform marked with the insignia of Air Force Special Operations Command. He was tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of officer who carried command in his war. No one expected his arrival. A few instructors straightened. One cadet moved to greet him. He didn't stop. He scanned the room once. Eyes passed over clipboards, name tapes, rank patches. Then they found her. Ava stood near the rear, her gloves still tucked under one arm, headset slung around her neck. The colonel froze. He took one step forward, then another. The room went still, held in place by the sudden shift in weight. That's her. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. He pointed. Slow, deliberate. That's the one who saved my team in Kandahar. No one moved. Cadets looked at each other, confused. Someone whispered, "What?" The colonel turned to an instructor, face unreadable. She was the JTAC. She was the one on the ground, called in fire support when we were pinned. She got us out. No questions, no qualifiers, just fact. Then the colonel did something no one was ready for. He snapped to attention and saluted, not out of politeness, not for formality, but with the discipline of a soldier who knew exactly who stood in front of him. Ava returned the salute. No shift in her posture, no change in her expression, just steady eyes, steady hand. Around them, cadets stood frozen. The ones who had laughed, doubted, talked behind her back. They couldn't look her in the eye now. No one had ever seen her like this, and maybe no one really had. Until now, 1910 hours. From that moment on, everything was different. Word spread slowly, almost reluctantly, like the base itself wasn't ready to accept who she really was. By 7:10 p.m., instructors were quietly asking around. One mentioned her name at the squadron desk. Another made a discreet call. Within an hour, the pieces began to fit. Ava Lewis hadn't just transferred into pilot training late. Years before she ever set foot in a T-6 cockpit, she was a combat controller. Air Force Special Operations Command, JTAC qualified. Embedded with teams in Kandahar during a rough spring in 2014. One of those missions went bad. Fast. 2 fire teams pinned in a dry ravine. Comms jammed. No air support was tracking the right location. She stayed on the ground for nearly 4 hours, under direct fire, relaying coordinates, stacking air assets, calling precision strikes so close the pilots had to double confirm. She was 24. Her father, an A-10 pilot, was on deployment in another province that same week. He didn't come back. She never talked about it. Never mentioned the Bronze Star, or the minor shrapnel wounds, or that some of the aircrew she coordinated with had written letters after the mission saying they owed her everything. After recovery, Ava requested reassignment. Not a command post, not promotion. She applied for pilot training. Not because if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Warriors for more untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and strength. Because the greatest battles aren't always the loudest, and the strongest warriors don't always shout. They just show up, and they get it done. Silent Warriors, where heroes speak without words. She wanted recognition, but because she knew those skies, her father died in them, she wanted to serve again, this time from above. She never told the others, didn't wear a patch, didn't ask for credit. Now cadets passed her in silence, not out of fear, but respect, the kind that doesn't come from medals or speeches. She wasn't trying to be more than a cadet. She just never was one to begin with. 2,110 hours. By 9:10 p.m., the base had gone quiet. Lights dimmed in the halls. Doors clicked shut. Outside, the wind shifted low across the pavement, just enough to rattle the edge of the flag near the admin building. Inside the study lounge, Ava sat alone. Same corner chair, same checklist open in front of her. The overhead light buzzed faintly above her. She was reviewing final approach procedures for the 3rd time, pen resting between her fingers. Footsteps approached, not fast, not hesitant, just there. A soft clink. A cup of black coffee steaming slightly was placed beside her binder. The hand didn't linger. No voice followed. No explanation. Just the quiet scrape of boots turning back down the hallway. She looked up. Didn't need to ask. The same cadet who used to mock her, used to call her Clipboard Chick, was already disappearing through the doorway. Shoulders squared. Head low. She didn't call after him. Didn't smile. She just sat there. One hand around the coffee. The other still on the checklist. Outside, the night deepened. No one laughed anymore. Not about her. Not after today. She never asked to be seen. She showed up early, stayed late, and let her work speak louder than her voice ever tried to. Ava Lewis didn't wear medals on her sleeve or stories on her lips. She carried memory and silence, honor in small gestures, and strength in the calm between storms. Some heroes fly, others guide from the shadows. She did both, and she never needed applause to know her place. Not all heroes wear wings. Some carry weight the world never notices, until one quiet day when they do. And we're reminded what dignity really looks like. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Silent Warriors for more untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and strength. Because the greatest battles aren't always the loudest, and the strongest warriors don't always shout. They just show up, and they get it done. Silent Warriors, where heroes speak without words.